Rainbow Push. Push Tech 2023.
So I'm CJ Azubuione. I'm the Senior Director for Exec and Board, and I lead the Exec Talent Solutions team here at Cisco. I've been at Cisco for about 7 years now, which is hard to believe come this summer. And I'm here with the incomparable Saidah Grayson-Dill. Please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
So first, I'm so happy to be here with everyone. I know you've had many chances to meet Brian, but I will say that the first time I ever saw Brian was at a Rainbow Push Tech Summit at his former employer. And I had just come back from maternity leave. So this is a full circle moment for me and Brian coming to Cisco. So I've been at Cisco for 15 years, and my roots in Silicon Valley Bay Area run deep. So I'll start with my grandmother. She came here from Alabama in the 50s. Her sister was working for a man in the Navy and was like, come on out to California. There is more opportunity here. And she came here and she started off doing domestic work in the Palo Alto, Atherton area. She eventually became a supervisor at a state-run hospital right next door to us, the Agnew Developmental Center. And she ended up having a granddaughter to graduate from Stanford University. I'm that granddaughter. So definitely full circle moment from the Bay Area. And on my father's side, my father is from the Chicago, shout out to Rainbow Push, Chicago, Gary, Indiana area. And he came to California around the same time and lived in San Francisco area since coming here. Currently, I live in San Jose, and I have, with my husband and our 3 children that keep us very busy, I have an almost 8-year-old and 2 6-year-olds.
Amazing. And you still do all the, can we put up that last slide with Saidah on there? Because I want everyone to see, you know, what we've got there. That's you right there, right?
That is
VP
me.
and Deputy Corporate Counsel.
That is me. Yeah.
How did you get there?
Whew. So I was listening to the statistics that Bishop was talking about Black women, about Black people in tech, and I have a similar background. I mean, I am a lawyer by training, and when you look at Black women who are lawyers, overall, it's about 2.5% of all lawyers are Black women. And you layer that on top of being in tech, and I look back and I say, wow, this has been phenomenal. And I will say I haven't gotten there alone.
Yeah.
Haven't gotten there alone.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I've remained at Cisco for 15 years is the supportive environment that I've found here and the community that I found here. And CJ is definitely part of that community. Brian is part of that community, and I see some people in the audience who are part of that community. Kevin Nichols, go ahead, raise your hand. I've known Kevin since college time, and he is definitely a star in the Bay Area community, helping young Black and Latino kids learn about science, get into tech, as well as other diversity efforts. So when I look around at my community here and the leaders that I've had at Cisco, it's been phenomenal, and I'm grateful to each and every one of them. I started off working at 2 major law firms prior to coming to Cisco, and I came to Cisco because of the people, because of the leadership that I had here, who said, come on in, we're gonna open the door for you, and you just step on through. And having that perspective, having that ability to bring my full self to work. As you see, I'm a Black woman, visibly Black, wear my hair natural. Unapologetically, I've worn my hair natural since working at a very non-Black law firm, and since coming to Cisco, I've always been me, and that's something that I've carried myself coming in. And when I think about leaders and our obligations to open up doors, we as Black leaders within our companies, within our communities, we're in a very unique position. And what we can do with that position and that leverage is we can open our mouths and open doors for other folks. Like I always like to say to people who I counsel and other leaders that I talk to, is say, I'm in rooms that you're not in. And because I'm in rooms that you're not in, I hear voices that you don't hear. And let me tell you what those voices say, because I don't know that you're going to get it any other way unless I'm communicating that to you. So when we're looking at a particular matter, let me tell you what's not being said in this conversation based on the communities that I'm in and I have access to.
You bring up a really excellent point around what we would say is network, the people that are connected to you and they're, advocates, mentors, all of these different things. What advice would you give to people around how do you be intentional around creating those folks? Because often it's like, people aren't looking at me now and making the decision about what they're going to do about me or you. There's conversations that happen outside of here where, like you said, those things are decided and you're not in that room to represent yourself. And so how do you connect yourself to those folks who can see what you do and then speak on your behalf? How have you done that?
So one, I reflect on what my passions are, right? And where those passions lead me. And I think about the work that I like to do. And as you lean into your strengths and you do the work that you like to do, people will see you flourish. People will see you strive. And usually when they see that, there's something magnetic that goes on with those conversations, with those experiences. And not being shy about what I like to do and what I'm intentional about, and speaking to the people who I've seen do it and execute, even if it's like, hi, my name is Saidah, I really like the work that you do. People may not remember you the first time, but the second or third time, the next event that they see you at, they might say, oh yeah, that's Saidah. Tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more. And it's through those conversations that you start planting seeds. So that when you're not in the room, you're implanted in the brain of those individuals and they're like, oh wait, I know someone. Let me look at my LinkedIn, let me look at my Rolodex, let me look at my phone. And yes, I remember this conversation. And that's, I also think it's important when people come up to you and tell you about their passions that we listen with an open heart and an open mind, right? We all are busy. We all can rush off and do other things. But if we remember what it felt like to be listened to and be heard, and we reflect that back to other folks, it allows them to say, oh, this person listened to me, this person heard me. I'm gonna walk into this room differently next time. I'm gonna walk in with a little bit more confidence. And through that, that's how you start to build a community of doers and movers and shakers and people who believe in themselves, which I think is one of the most important things that anyone can walk in or out of a room with that confidence of, I know what I'm doing and I believe in you and you believe in me and let's do it together. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent advice. The other thing you said that I thought was very interesting is how you're like, I show up as who I am. And we got a fan up here who said unapologetic. It's like that's how I've known you. Just show up and that's who you are. And, especially for those of us who would consider ourselves part of the underrepresented communities, that's not always the easiest thing to do. And so what advice do you have for folks who are struggling with that, who feel like, when I come into work, I have to hide large parts of who I am to be able to be successful, to be able to exist in the space that I am?
So I like to think about it through a bit of a thought experiment, which is, what is the worst that can happen if you show up fully yourself in the space, right? Now I know people have bills that they need to pay, they have mouths that they need to feed. And that might cause a little hesitation in your ability to show up as yourself. So what you can do is find that safe space, right? Find that person within that organization, within that community, like, hey, I can't walk around with this mask on every 24 hours a day, 8 hours a day, however long you're in that room, in that community. But with you, I feel like I can be myself. And once you get comfortable being yourself around that one person or that community, you'd be amazed to how comfortable you feel about being yourself and being a little bit more vulnerable with other folks. And when they see you, again, they're like, oh, I noticed a bit of a change in you. And that's not always negative, that's sometimes positive. And do that more. It's a practice. It's a muscle that you build as you move forward in various aspects of life. And that's the advice that I would give people.
What I hear you saying is just start small.
Yeah.
You know, there's no need to come in and, it's start in the place that you feel comfortable, and with time, you'll show up as the person that you want to be in that space. Tell us about in your role. This session is about, creating an inclusive future. So in your role, how are you going about doing that?
So I'll give a team perspective, and then I'll give how I show up to other people in advice and counsel role that I have. When I look at my team, I really want the team to be a safe space. And what I mean by safe space is I want you to be able to share your ideas with me without fear of retribution. I want you to come to work excited about what we're doing and our mission. And I feel like the only way that you can really do that if you don't come in fearful. And when I'm looking at my team and I know that they're coming in space without fear of retribution, I'm always amazed with the ideas that they come up with, the things that we can try. I mean, we're in Silicon Valley. Innovation is the name of the game. If you're not innovating and you're staying in place, then you might as well, go someplace else, right? So when I think about how to foster that culture of innovation, having an inclusive environment is so fundamentally key to that you cannot move forward without it. And then I think about, what voices am I not hearing? Do I need to have one-on-ones with people to say, I'm not hearing your voice, I want to hear your voice, right? Because not all of us provide information and feedback or reactions in the same way. Some people do it in a group setting, some people one-on-one. But I like to go to each team member and kind of find out what makes you tick. And then I look around my team, I say, is my team diverse? From a gender, racial, ethnicity perspective. And as long as I have that diversity within my team, again, you have the diversity of thought. Now, when it comes to the advice I give, someone once told me, they're like, oh, you're in a legal position. You don't understand how much power you have. They say, if legal says it, then it must be so. And I just kind of chuckle at that. My WebEx picture is me with these star glasses, and people are like, that's such a funny picture. I'm like, yes, because I want you to see me, as I want you to be disarmed and talk to me like you would talk to a person, not like you're talking to legal. And therefore, when I'm talking to leaders, when I'm talking to peers at the company, I want them to understand that yes, they may be having difficulties with someone on their team, but have they thought about it from the perspective of their team member? This is a safe place for you to role play, for you to ask questions, for you to experiment, for us to think about, the what ifs, and making sure that you're looking at your network and you're like, you can't really relate to this person because you don't have any Black folk in your network, or you don't have any Latinos in your network, or you don't have any Asians in your network. So what does that mean in terms of how you view this person on your team? So you might have some work to do. So go off and do your work and come back and think about it from a different perspective. So really utilizing those life experiences that I have, again, those places that I have entry point, entree to, those spaces that I enter that some other folks may not enter, right, to really leverage that and amplify those conversations and those voices to people who may not necessarily hear it, which is why I love our proximity initiative.
Okay, perfect. Tell us about the proximity. This is great. I don't even have to ask you questions. You just tell us about the proximity initiative.
So Cisco's proximity initiative was born out of having Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative come speak to us. Now, Brian and our CEO, Chuck, sit on the board of the Ford Foundation. And Chuck, in all his wisdom, said, Brian, why don't you come and talk to the employee population over at Cisco? And this was in 2019. So pre the murder of George Floyd, pre-COVID, pre-mass social unrest. And Brian came, And for those of you guys who don't know Brian Stevenson is probably the foremost legal scholar on the death penalty and disparities between white people and non-white people in the administration of the death penalty. He also has a museum in Alabama about lynchings that have occurred within the United States. And is just a ridiculously smart person. And he talks about proximity. And he says part of the reasons why we have a lot of inequality in the world and a way that we can fix it is you need to get proximate to various communities. Again, you look at your network, you're like, I only have one type of person in my network. Okay, well, I don't know anything about X person. And instead of knowing them as a gender or a race or a sexual orientation, you get to know that person as a person. What makes them tick, about their families, about themselves. And when you see people as persons, as opposed to a race, a sex, a nationality, or a sexual orientation, it kind of changes your brain and how you relate to the next person who may have that same profile. So what Cisco did, and shout out to Alex Allen, is who leads up the Proximity Initiative at Cisco, really thought about, how do you turn this into a differentiator within the workforce? So what happens is that every VP and above at Cisco is supposed to have a proximity meeting every quarter. That means you get with someone that shares a dimension that is different from you, whether it be ability status, race, socioeconomic, and you just get to know that person as a person. And then you have a reflection log that talks about like what you learned from that interaction.
It's a great program because you talked about perspective earlier, and trying to broaden your perspective is about encountering difference and understanding different perspectives. And I can imagine as a legal scholar, I'm going to put that on you, that I worked at a law school for a period of time, and I'm like, that's what you were generally doing, looking at perspectives. Yeah. For those who don't have that kind of background or that kind of training, how would you advise them to go about that, thinking about different perspectives?
A few different ways. During the pandemic, I got really into listening to podcasts. There are so many free podcasts out there.
You and every one of us.
That's what I did during my walks. I would listen to various podcasts. And for someone who doesn't have a lot of time, I think podcasts are great capsule summaries that allow you the ability to listen in on a conversation that you may not necessarily hear between two people who, 2 or 3 people or 4 people who you might not necessarily hear from. You can connect it to your car while you're driving, you can listen to it while you're walking. If you want to go deeper, there are books that you can read into. I know, especially post the murder of George Floyd, there was a lot of discussions about which books to read. And a lot of scholars who were out there saying like, hey, I can help you get proximate. I can help you understand communities better. And it's up to everyone if they want to listen to these scholars, read the books, et cetera, or you just get out in the world, right?
Yep.
You go to an event that has people on it that you're like, hey, I've never gone to, a Jewish community event. I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to see what it's like. So I think there are several different ways to get out in the world that are free, either the virtual or physical world that are free, and a little bit of a light lift for folks who are just trying to get their toe wet and like, let me see what other communities are doing. Let me see if there's some similarities to my community. Yeah. And what does that mean for me as a leader going forward? What does it mean as a teacher going forward? What does it mean to me as a parent going forward?
I think that's a great way of pitching this summit for 2024. So for those of you out there who are like, I need to get to different communities, just look around this room. I don't know if you can see from the cameras, but if you need to be exposed to people from different communities, this is a great event for you to attend next year to be able to do that. Because I love that idea. You have to get out into the world and start to experience the different folks that are out there. And I think to also just understand the difference in the groups. There was often, in 2020, talk about what it meant to be African American as though all of us are the same. And I think if you look around this room, there's difference in even who we are. So you have to come into the community and really become part of that community to understand that difference. We probably have a lot of leaders out there who will watch this recording. I think this is also being put out over the internet. And the bishop talked about agitators, folks who are going to shake up the way that things are done. And so I'm appealing to the leaders out there who are what we would say in the majority group, who are the ones who have the opportunity to make the change that we are seeking. What do you say to those leaders when it comes to thinking about an inclusive future and creating inclusive teams? What kind of advice and guidance would you give to those leaders who want to be part of this? And I'd say that's the vast majority of leaders who are out there, and many of them are just like, well, how?
Yeah, for those leaders who want to be part of this, there's no time like the present. What are we waiting for? There are several opportunities. There's a lot of talent probably on your own teams. Get to know people on your teams. Get out there in the world, various social functions, various networking events, and get to understand people and understand not all talent looks the same. I think we know that inherently, but especially Silicon Valley can get in a rut. Like success looks like a white man in a hoodie who went to a certain college. And we all know here that that's one perspective of success, but success comes in all different shapes, sizes, and flavors. And until we start to understand that and realize that and experience that, you're in a rut. Mm-hmm. You're in a rut, you're stuck, you're not innovating. You're looking to do something that someone's already done. Go on the path that is not chosen and see what wonderful things that can happen by reaching out to people who are different than you.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a curveball here.
Okay.
So I'm going to stretch out all the minutes that I have left. What you just said reminds me of a term we often use. We often say, does someone have executive presence? And what that has meant in the past looked like. Yeah. We all know what it looks like. I don't know if I have to say what it is. How should we be looking at and thinking about that term moving forward as we start to broaden what the executive presence looks like?
It's so funny. I think about this a lot, right? What does executive presence look like? Especially, again, as a Black woman, and like there's one Black CEO of a Fortune 500, one Black woman, two Black female CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, 500. Mm-hmm. 0 Black female senators, and I think, what does success look like?
Right.
What does executive presence look like? But what gives me hope is the influencers, mm-hmm. right? Because what is leadership? Leadership is having influence. And I think about like, who has the influence? If I look at all the Black creatives, if I look at all the Latino creatives, they are shaping culture. Right? And when you know the old saying that culture eats strategy for lunch any day of the week, these people are leaders. Yep. And they need to be recognized as such. And when you see these creatives in the leadership position they have and the followership they have, I mean, millions and millions of followers. They get people to look at their phones every day. Yeah. Yeah. That is power. That is a ridiculous amount of power. And you translate that to the corporate sphere, right? Now the finance, the legal, the supply chain, that is stuff that can be taught to someone who already has that innate ability to influence. And I always think about, especially when we're thinking about job descriptions, like what does a good candidate look like? Then I think about like what can be taught? And are we really thinking about what can we be taught versus those innate qualities that you see in different aspects? A friend of mine was in admissions at Stanford, and one of her first class of admits included a woman who was a church pianist. Now, and this was a Black woman who was looking at applications, and she's like, I know if you're a church pianist, you were there every Sunday, you were there for junior choir rehearsal, you were there for senior choir rehearsal, and you're there any time that the reverend needs you. Yep. You are dependable. Yep.
Consistent.
And you are consistent.
Dedicated.
And you are dedicated, and you have a full church who is looking at you as a leader. And that's one of the key goals that I see and the importance I see about having diversity in many places, to recognize that. Because had this woman not had the Black experience, the Black church experience, would this candidate and all of her great qualities, in addition to her academic qualities, but would those parts, those intangible parts of her applications, would those have been brought to life? I wonder if that would have been the case.
Yeah. I love that answer because it ties into what you talked about from the perspective. We have to shift our perspective on what the executive is supposed to look like in order to be able to give folks the opportunity. It's not about a look.
Yep.
It's about so much more than that. So to be able to get that mindset will give you the opportunity to bring more diversity and inclusion into an organization. All right, we're coming up on time soon, but I'm going to ask a question that I have some passion around, which is, in 2020, there was a lot of commitment from corporate America to change the way that they were doing things, to create more inclusive environments. Mm-hmm. And now we're in 2023. And so do you see a momentum shift? What is your thoughts on what this last 3 years has looked like?
I have a lot of thoughts.
I know you do.
I will share a few of them. I think a lot of companies were well-intentioned, but did they have the will to see it through? Mm-hmm. And a lot of that comes for those of us in a room holding those companies accountable mm-hmm. to the promises that they made. Mm-hmm. And then we think about the political headwinds that some of those companies face. And we think about something as simple as ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and that's almost like a bad word in some legislatures. Like how is focusing on the environment, on social diversity, equity, inclusion, how is that a bad thing? And so you have companies who are fearful about that retribution. So it is incumbent upon each one of us to show those companies that we support you. We support those efforts. And really link arms with the allies, because we can't go it alone. I think history has taught us that. History has shown us that we can be the agitators, we can be the sparks. But in order to have a sustaining, lasting impact, we need allies. We need to link arms with people to be like, come on, let's do this together. Let's have a united front, and let's move things forward. So I think 2020 was a moment in time. I think we are at an inflection point when I think about the Supreme Court and what they may do to affirmative action. And I think about the power of people and people in the street and raising our voices. We cannot let that go. We cannot let that momentum dissipate.
I loved when the bishop talked about agitation, because I love to agitate, especially in the workplace. Because again, when you said innovation comes from sort of creating that. And so as we're about to leave here, what one thing would you say folks can go and do to start to agitate within their organizations? Sorry, Cisco, but that's what... I know Fran supports this. Fran and Chuck are agitators themselves, so I know that they do support that.
I would say ask the question that no one else is asking, right? There's a lot of questions that are murmured after me and CJ leave, we might have some questions. No, ask the questions in the open forum. Ask the questions of your leaders. Yeah. Unless leaders hear that, such and such, the community has this question, they don't necessarily have to address it. Oh, I'm not hearing this. So ask that question. Whatever is on your mind, it's important, it's necessary, and leaders need to hear the questions that you may have.
100%. And find organizations that do that. When you're out there looking for organizations, find organizations that support this idea of debate and agitating from within, because that's how you become a better organization. So, okay, we made excellent time. 52 seconds left. I just want to put that on the record. Thank you so much, Saidah, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. Thank you all for having us and listening to the wisdom that Saidah's had to share.
Thank you, CJ. Yeah. Thank you all for being here.